Yo! Well, hello. Where did you come from?
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is a tag, probably going to go up on a Tuesday. Not sure, I don't always put tags up on Tuesdays, but it's the thing to do, isn't it? So anyway, this is a tag that I've been very kindly tagged in, which is really cool. And it was started by a channel called Spread Book Joy. Check out their channel, it's really good. And I was personally tagged by Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics. A really good channel. Check Alan out. Hi Al. Thanks for tagging me. And the tag is called my reading evolution tag. So it's all about how your reading is developed. So I have had a recent tag up which is called relationships tag, and it does talk about authors that you've had a long relationship with, books you've had a long relationship, books you've owned for a long time, and that kind of thing. So I'm going to try not to repeat myself too much, but if anyone wants to look at that video, I'll put that at the end, put that up on the screen at the end, and that's an original tag that I made a little while ago. Clearly there's some crossover, it's not that original, but I was doing it for a particular reason that you'll see in the video, and there's a couple of questions in there that probably a little bit more original. But anyway, this is a really cool tag, and it covers some areas that I didn't cover. And also I could go into some more detail about some other things I didn't mention. So, reading evolution tag, and there's 4 questions, and then I'll tag a few people at the end as well. So, the first question is, how has your taste in books evolved? Okay, at school, I do remember that I really liked Mark Twain when we studied Mark Twain. I really enjoyed Mark Twain. And I really liked To Kill a Mockingbird when we studied that in school. So Mark Twain and To Kill a Mockingbird were really big hitters for me when I was in my English classes. And 1984. So 1984 is clearly a lot heavier than those other two and a lot more densely written, but still hit me. So I would have been probably at 14, I guess, when we were studying 1984. And even though it's quite a dry book, I was really impressed with it. I've given away one of my copies now, so I've just got a copy that I really like that I recently bought that's got a really nice cover on it, and I do think that 1984 is a really important book. So Mark Twain as well I do have vivid memories of really enjoying the English lessons when we looked at the Huck Finn stories. So that's a big part of my memory from that point of view. And also, when I was a young teenager, so the early teens, I was buying magazines a lot. I will go back a little bit. So before the teens, I was buying comics, and I did buy Spider-Man comics, and I did buy Iron Man comics, and I bought comics like Beano and Whizzer and Chips. So I don't know if that will translate to other countries, but I know in the UK, the Beano was huge, but I know that Whizzer and Chips was huge, and nobody really talks about that anymore. But I think those things gave me a lifelong love of cartoonists. And if you've been anywhere near my channel for a while, you know that I collect cartoonist books, and it's a big part of my book collection. And I've got about 120, 130 cartoonist books. So I've always loved that kind of thing. And that goes right back to the Beano and Whizzer and Chips, really. So I was reading comics when I was really little, and then got into magazines big style when I was a teenager. And I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but there was Starburst magazine and Starlog magazine. Those were the 2 big ones. And I actually remember, I had a friend of mine, I might have mentioned him, when I did the Astounding Science Fiction tag, I might have mentioned this guy, because he was such an important friend for turning me on to lots of stuff. And I remember the first time he showed me science fiction magazines like Starlog and Starburst. Genuinely have a really vivid memory of being in his room and him saying, "Oh, I bought these." And I just thought it was absolutely magical. And the Twilight Zone magazine was a big part of my teenage years. Yeah, so magazines were a big deal anyway for me. So if you guys bought magazines, I'd love to see in the comments, because it's something that we don't really talk about on BookTube. And I do miss them, actually. I miss magazines. I think there's something magical and special about magazines. And then as it evolved and I became interested in novels and stories as a teenager, there were 5 big authors that really hit me hard, and I kind of collected everything I could see by them. I was reading around them. I was reading lots of others as well. So I read some of the classic, famous people that were even more famous than them in the science fiction field. But the 5 that really meant something to me personally, that I just absolutely got with their writing style, was Ray Bradbury, Robert Sheckley, Richard Matheson, Harlan Ellison, and actually Harry Harrison. So the first 4, well, I don't know if this is true for Robert Sheckley, but certainly Ray Bradbury, Richard Matheson, and Harlan Ellison are 3 very revered and respected authors. I think Robert Sheckley is as well, but you don't hear people talk about him a lot. But he means a lot to me. His writing means a lot to me. And Harry Harrison, you really hardly ever hear anything by him, and it seems to be because it's a little bit more pulpy, a little bit more like pop science fiction, and that might be why people don't necessarily go on about his stuff, although he does have a very famous and iconic dystopian book called Make Room, which was made into the film Soylent Green. So that's one area of his work that seems to have a different reputation than a huge bulk of his work, which is probably seen as more pulp science fiction. As I said, it's said by countless people how brilliant Ray Bradbury is, and Harlan Ellison's had a lot of attention recently, which is quite nice. So people are talking about how good he was as a writer, and Richard Matheson gets a lot of attention quite rightly as well, and talks about how great he was. I do think Robert Sheckley doesn't get talked about enough, but out of those 5 initial authors that I collected as much as I could of and read everything I could by, Harry Harrison seems to be the one that people just sort of think, yeah, whatever, he's just a pulpy guy, I think. Please tell me in the comments if you have a different impression and you think he's just as respected, but I get the impression he's not, and that's probably because of his stuff is easier to read, it's lighter to a degree, and I've been rereading some stuff recently, and it is lighter, but I do think he's got a good way of writing, and he's got a great way of telling the story through the characters, very defined characters, and I think that's really cool. Okay, so then the other people I was reading at the same time as I was collecting and reading everything I could of those 5 people were some other big names. So I was reading Stephen King at the time. I was reading Michael Moorcock. I was reading David Eddings. I had read Lord of the Rings when I was 15. I was reading Fritz Leiber's Fafhrd and Grey Mouser series. I absolutely loved them. They're some of my favourite books, the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser books. So I was reading those people as well. So the only reason why I haven't included them in the big 5 is because I wasn't necessarily trying to collect everything I could by them, but they were big names for me. So, and H.G. Wells as well. So I was reading some H.G. Wells at the time as well. So at school, when I was turned on to people like Mark Twain, I think that's kind of comparable to me discovering H.G. Wells myself. Although, having said that, I do remember we did look at The Country of the Blind in English class. So that might have, but I think I'd read The Invisible Man before I had looked at that in class, I think. But H.G. Wells was someone I was reading pretty young as well. And Terry Pratchett as well. So those kind of people were the ones I was reading, and I just loved science fiction and fantasy all the way through my 20s. When I got through my 20s and into my 30s, I started reading a lot of non-fiction because I started a degree. So I started studying at university late as a mature student, and I started studying history. And before I did that, I had to do a course on philosophy as well, and the media, and Europe. I did a course on European studies, which is like a course about the EU, which was really good actually, because when Brexit came along, I actually felt like I knew what I was talking about, and didn't seem like anyone else did. It was a very strange, heated, and incredibly simplistic debate when Brexit was happening. That may be for another video or another live conversation, but I did this course that included lots of things, and because I read a lot about the EU at the time, and I was reading about philosophy, read about the basic tenets of philosophy and a lot of the big philosophers from different periods, I really got into it. I loved that. I thought that was really interesting. And it was nice to look at life from a different perspective and see these different perspectives from these different philosophers. And that set me up to do the history course as well, because those things reference history a lot. And for that 3 years when I studied history, I read a lot of history books, a lot. You can't do a degree without reading tons of books, and every single essay I wrote, I used to sit on that bed with, I don't know, about 15 or 20 books on the bed. I'd be going through them all, finding the right quotes, reading them for ages to find out if they're relevant to the subject I was doing. You know, you always had to get more books out than you use, because you didn't know if they were any use until you'd read them. So I just read so much stuff at the time. That was really interesting, but it really dominated my reading for ages, and it kind of it lasted a little bit longer than the courses as well. So there was a good period of about 7 or 8 years when I was just reading philosophy and history and things that relate to that. So sociological stuff as well. Some of the people that were like some of the feminist writers and people like Raphael Samuel and people like that. So I was reading those kind of things as well as the history and philosophy. So I was doing that for quite a while. And then I realised that it had been a while since I'd read fiction regularly. So I was kind of dipping into fiction now and again. And I really missed it, and I felt like I needed to get back to it. So I made a concerted effort to get back to it, which I did. And again, I went back to science fiction and fantasy as a whole, but I nip into the classics sometimes. And I studied Shakespeare at college as well. So I've done some of the, so I've dipped into those kind of classics with that kind of thing, and the Greek stuff and the Roman stuff. I did an A-level in classical civilization as well, so I've studied a lot of the Greeks and Romans. So that meant reading some of the works like Homer's books and Aristophanes and all the sort of philosophical stuff like Plato and Socrates, those kind of things. I read some of that, a lot of that as well when I was doing my A-levels. But the sort of 19th century classics, I haven't read that many, but I've read some. So when I went back into reading fiction as a regular thing and trying to make an effort to try and catch up, if that's the right term, I did go back to science fiction and fantasy. That is my first love. That's what I absolutely love reading. So that's how my taste has evolved. And recently, in the last 10 years, I've made a real effort to read a lot of recent authors, and a lot of my favourite books have come out and from authors that have been, you know, relatively young authors that are writing now that are just doing some fantastic stuff. So, second question, has the format of your reading changed much? Well, I still love physical books, and I only really read physical books. So I love finding books. I love paperbacks. Smell of paperbacks. I love paperbacks. I will have hardbacks, and I guess they do last longer in the sense of their condition, but I do make an effort to try and keep them my paperbacks in good condition. But the feel of paperbacks is awesome. Audiobooks, so far, it's hard because my mind wanders, so I haven't really got used to it yet, but I think I need to get used to it. Once I'm used to it, I think that'll be fine. Ebooks, I don't get on with ebooks because I'd rather have a physical thing than a device to, you know, people are so stuck to screens, and I just think it's not necessarily good for you to be sticking your face on a screen all the time. So I feel like take me away from a screen, give me a book, I prefer that. So that's my thing with ebooks, because I see all the arguments for ebooks, and definitely there's lots of conveniences in ebooks, absolutely. There's loads of ways that it's a better way to read, but I don't like this attachment to screens. But one thing that has changed over the years, recently, in the last about 3 or 4 years, 3 years, 4, I don't know how long, but I now have to wear glasses to read. So it's not the end of the world until my glasses break and I haven't got spares. So I do use these. You might have seen me put these on if I've read something, like when I did my poetry video, I kept putting them on. So I do have to wear these sometimes, well, a lot of the time. So that's one change. Other than that, physical books and paperbacks preferably. Number 3, how much do you read? Has it changed? Yes, it has actually. So, like I said, fiction is kind of fluctuated because of the courses I did. But actually, how much I read has changed because of how quickly I read has changed. So I read faster nowadays than I used to as a teenager, which is quite cool. And I don't really get that, because you'd have thought when you're younger your mind would be working quicker and all that. But I don't know what it is, but I seem to be able to read faster now. So I don't read particularly fast, but definitely faster than I did. I've got more of a desire to read more books. And I guess maybe when you're younger, your whole life's ahead of you and you don't feel like the angel of death on the other side of the room staring at you. That could be it. And then the 4th question is, how has booktube changed your reading? Booktube's changed my reading loads. So I've seen loads of suggestions from different booktubers and discovered new authors from it. Rediscovered classics that I realised I'd not read yet or that I'd forgotten about. Maybe I had read when I was younger, but wasn't really sure what I thought of the book. Loads and loads of reasons why booktube and the booktubers have changed my reading, and it's kind of encouraged me to give a wider range of classics a chance a little bit sometimes as well. But it's also made me kind of it's also reaffirmed how I felt about the stuff I do like as well, knowing that there's other people that like it as well, which is quite nice. But yeah, booktube has done wonders for my reading. And one thing I was going to do, you tell me in the comments if you think this is an interesting idea. I was going to do a video, 10 books that I wouldn't have read without booktube's help. And I was going to literally do 10 shout outs through some books that I've discovered through booktube. So I think that's a nice idea, and it's bouncing off that question, how has booktube changed your reading? Because it genuinely has, and sometimes it could be I wouldn't have heard of that author before, or it might take me longer to find out, or I might have skimmed it on the shelf and not really noticed it on my radar because it hadn't been said. So booktube has done wonders for that. And then one last thing, I'm going to tag some people. I don't know if they've done it, but I'm going to tag Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads. I'm going to tag David Wiley, and I'm going to tag Brandy from Booklectic. I'll go for Fred from Read by Fred as well. Anyway, thanks for watching, and see you later. Bye.